Now to the cover story of this week's magazine, TikTok Intifada. Journalist James Ball is the author of the piece, arguing that social media is inflaming international tension. In the Israel-Palestine conflict, for instance, videos shared on TikTok encourage violence and spread disinformation. James joins me now with Seth Fransman, a Middle East analyst and journalist based in Jerusalem. James, in this week's cover piece, you say that TikTok and social media inflame global conflict. The most recent example of this violence is in Israel and Palestine. What role has it played there?
I think for a while we've known that there's the potential for social media to inflame sort of ongoing tensions just through making them just through making them more visible and sort of really evoking emotions. Obviously, if people can see firsthand the aftermath of an attack or something like that, it really gives the immediacy. What we're seeing sort of move into it that's a bit new and a bit escalating is that sort of in the run-up to the tensions that led to the sort of latest bout of conflict in Gaza, was there seemed to be a TikTok trend around assaulting visibly Jewish people. There was quite a viral video of a man being assaulted by two teenagers on public transport. And these sort of challenges against a sort of already tense backdrop seem to really add fuel to the fire in country. And then what's happened as the conflict sort of broken out is even people who don't seek out anything on Israel-Palestine, who've never thought about the issue, who've never engaged with it, suddenly see it in their TikTok feeds, in their Twitter feeds, on Facebook. And it really sort of escalates things. It makes it harder for either side to back down, even if they wanted to.
James, why is TikTok becoming the popular place to share this horrible kind of thing? You can post videos on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, so why is this the platform?
It's difficult to sort of say. I don't think it is the only one. I think this is happening on every platform, but TikTok's the new one and the one that has the youngest user base. And so it's often people's introduction to politics. It also seems to be sort of perhaps the most tilted in one direction. You can sort of go quite quickly on TikTok on its discovery page from looking at what you would usually do. And it's got lots of, diet pill type stuff. It's got inspirational baking. It's got makeup tutorials. And you could jump to that to then suddenly a very jarring sort of depiction of violence in Gaza. Just because of what's working on the content and the strange way its algorithm works. I think one thing that's become notable on TikTok is its Jewish users now just cannot escape the issue. In a way that's really kind of not okay. People who have no connection to Israel, have never lived in Israel, have never sort of expressed support for the actions of Israel's government and are doing a video about something totally unrelated, will just find that all of their reactions and responses are free Palestine. Just as we don't think it's acceptable to hold, say, a British Muslim accountable for what the state of Saudi Arabia does, there really is problems inherent in that kind of response, and we are seeing quite a lot of that on TikTok.
Seth, you're in Jerusalem. Can you give us an update on what's happening right now?
Yeah, I think there is an attempt now to achieve a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, but there has also been, so far, I think by day 11, a total of 4,000 rockets fired, and there was an attack on a bus this morning, a military bus near the Gaza Strip by an anti-tank missile. And we've had sirens around the Gaza Strip and I think up into Ashkelon. So it does appear that, Hamas will try to continue firing rockets and achieve attacks right up until whatever ceasefire is broken so that they can claim that they kind of won. And I think that's what we'll see. There has been a relatively, let's say, quiet 8 or 10 hours, and I don't think there's been a lot of airstrikes by Israel as well. So it remains to be seen if by Friday the conflict may end.
Seth, what we're seeing on social media is a growing but not necessarily new phenomenon. Can you talk to us about the history of social media in Middle East conflicts? I know it was used notably in the 2011 Arab Spring, for example.
Yeah, I think that social media certainly helped to transform the Middle East in terms of giving lots of people, a decade and a half ago, a lot more of a voice, average people. I think, though, there was a change, after the Arab Spring, in which you also saw a lot of social media used by ISIS and extremists. So that, I remember back in 2014, people were just publishing beheading videos and stuff. People were putting the most graphic content on. And they say that when Twitter and Facebook went to remove pro-ISIS accounts, they had to remove millions of them. So there was a huge amount of extremist content. So actually, what was supposed to be a positive thing for people to protest against authoritarian regimes actually became, instead of something that helps people or achieves coexistence, I would say that it helped to radicalize large numbers of people. And actually, it enabled something like 50,000 people from around the world to come join ISIS, because they were able usually to coordinate initially on social media, and then they were able to use other things like WhatsApp or whatever. But that's how many of them, it seemed to be able to actually physically were able to come. So I think that is a very bad phenomenon. You could almost argue that the explosion in the use of social media helped to contribute to the ISIS genocide. And I think that if you go back to the era of bin Laden, remember, he used to produce like tapes and stuff that were handed out one-to-one, You can't radicalize as many people if you're distributing tapes. You can do it a lot faster if you're using a platform that gives you access to billions of people. So I think that, unfortunately, we've seen that social media, in a strange way, radicalized and made people more sectarian. And now, of course, the big organizations or corporations that run it have tried to then, I think in a kind of arbitrary, ham-handed manner, try to cut off little pieces here and here. Like, let's get rid of ISIS accounts. Let's get rid of the radical right. That's fine. But there isn't a lot of a systematic thought put into it. And I think we've come to a point now where even states in the region, like Turkey or other places, will try to get the companies actually to remove content that they don't agree with, or they pass laws, for instance, that will make it so you, for instance, can't post certain things if you're in certain countries. I think that is unfortunately turning us into a bit of an Orwellian world. So it's totally the opposite of what we thought social media was going to be doing. But that also is, kind of the onus, I guess, is on the average person, because it's a Hobbesian world. People are not necessarily good. So social media, in some ways, just catered to the loudest, worst voices, because we're generally used to the fact that the average, normal, nice person just doesn't have a megaphone. So I think that that's something we saw a lot in the Middle East, unfortunately.
James, can you talk us through the psychology of posting these videos to social media in the first place? You would think that posting such a graphic, horrible video to a platform like TikTok would lose you support, not help you gain support.
I think there's sometimes sort of the shock of the new. People want to feel engaged. People might not want to watch a traditional news show, but I think Gen Z gets quite patronised if people suggest they're not into news or they're only into minor stuff. And so part of it is a desire to sort of show that you're taking things seriously, but also the sort of key tone of a good social post, as well as kind of tugging on emotions, is trying to sort of explain something that the mainstream isn't telling you. Now, that can often be the full-on conspiratorial QAnon stuff that we tend to see on Facebook, actually, and YouTube more than TikTok. But it can also be hey, but what they're not telling you is this was actually a colonial settlement to do X, Y, or Z. And that sort of, networked, informal kind of thing sort of helps pull people in. It helps sort of build a community. It helps get a bit of credo. People like to feel knowing. And so it sort of does appeal to people. It's a good cause. It's a good protest cause. And sort of young adults in every generation have always wanted those. And of course, it does attach to a real serious political movement. It's just often the way social introduces people to it can be quite strange. And it should be said, there is quite a lot of outright misinformation on actually pro-Israel and pro-Palestine accounts. People reusing old videos, people kind of knowingly misleading, including some people tied to ministries. So it's really a mess out there.
Seth, finally, to follow on from James's point and point you were making before when you were saying that actually in many ways in the past social media has been used as a force for good. How do you weigh it up now with these kinds of videos going around with the disinformation? Do you think social media has been a force for good when it comes to political matters?
I don't know if it's necessarily a force for good, but I mean, it's a force. It's a medium, right? I mean, I don't know if radio or TV or print media have always been a force for good. I mean, it's a nature of a platform. So I just think it exists. I think that it can do good. I think when you have a conflict, you obviously tend to then emphasize all the worst attributes of things, because obviously, the worst scenes of children being killed or what have you are going to be posted, even if they're fake, but it doesn't matter. That's the kind of thing that's going to be passed around. But I think, look, after the Abraham Accords last year, when there was peace between Israel and some of the Gulf states, social media played a huge role, I think, in terms of among a small group of people of posting, stories about coexistence and Hanukkah and joint shared holidays. So, it can also be a place that lots of people meet. I mean, I think that's one positive aspect. So when there is a kind of positive wind blowing of peace and things like that, then you can see it definitely as a force for good. So I think it also just depends maybe on what kind of controversy or what kind of political climate there is at the time.
Thank you, James, and thank you, Seth.